Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dennis Zaire. I work here for the Konrad Adenauer Foundation as a Senior Program Manager, and I will be your moderator for the event tonight. Tonight, we are going to discuss insights of women in Namibia's workforce, and you are all welcome for joining us tonight. Allow me, with your permission, ladies and gentlemen, to, before handing over the mic to the director to officially welcome us and make us feel at home, allow me also to introduce the panelists who are going to help us to discuss the issues, share the information they have, and also their expert opinion on the subject matter. On my immediate left, we have got our Honorable Minister of Justice, Honorable Yvonne Dausap. She will be discussing the laws affecting Namibia's female labor force, especially the policies and other incentives. And then on her immediate left, we are joined by Kaylin Basson, who is also a board member of Sister Namibia and Namibia Film Commission, and also Let's Do It Namibia. And Kaylin will be talking on continued education and skills development, opportunities for skills development in Namibia female workforce. On her immediate left, we are joined by Deputy Commissioner for the Namibia Correctional Services, Natasha Boysen, who is also going to be talking on equality and good governance in the workplace. You are welcome, and thank you for joining us. Thank you. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, with your permission, to now allow the director of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation to officially welcome us, and then we can commence with the discussion. Thank you. Frau Rusman.
Honorable Yvonne Dausap, Minister of Justice, participating in our discussion tonight, representatives from the ministries, policing and correctional services, dear panelists, the media, ladies and gentlemen, all participants, also those who are joining us online tonight. Let me welcome you to our today's public debate, which is about women in Namibia's workplace. Let me also welcome you to our office here at the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in Windhoek in the CBD at the Mutual Tower. Konrad Adenauer Foundation is a German political foundation established in Namibia since independence. As our main mission is to support and promote democracy, rule of law, and dialogue, it is important to cultivate public debates such as this. It is about participating in society, raising awareness, sharing knowledge and information. We had an earlier public debate similar like this one. It was about the national budget. And we would like to continue and have more this kind of public debate in our office. Ladies and gentlemen, according to Namibia's 2011 population and housing census, women make up to 51.6% of the population. However, although women constitute majority to the Namibian population, they are less likely to be employed in comparison to the male counterparts. We chose the topic Women in Namibia's Workplace because we believe that in terms of gender, the opportunities in practice are still not equal, especially when it comes to accessibility to the labor market and later on to career building. Women often have to face much higher burden every day to overcome their daily life comparing to men do. We start the day preparing kids to school, attending them after school, look after their homework, taking care of the household, and at the same time to be fully employed. We do have interruption in our professional journey due to family issues, which men do not have normally in that manner. Moving on, when the kids are out of the house, grown up, the parents are queuing, waiting for support, financial-wise, or even in terms of care. Not to forget the situation of many single mothers facing every day. They just rely on one income and cannot share their responsibility in parenting with another partner. How to become economically independent in these circumstances? We all know that reduced financial resources and inability to meet basic needs contributes to social frictness and gender-based violence, drug abuse, and alcoholism. On the other side, ladies and gentlemen, we are living in a modern world. Women can do the same like men do, even become a pilot or servicing the army or the policing sector. Ladies and gentlemen, we are lucky that Namibia has a progressive policy on constitution in regard of good governance, equality, and women's rights. Namibia has paid special attention to women's empowerment and gender equality, putting it at its integral part in its constitution. Significant targets have been met to boost the share of women in the National Assembly, zebra policy, which is applicable to the parliament and government. 44% of Namibians MPs are women. I think we can be proud of this. Namibia has put up relevant legislative framework to place to ensure that women have access to the same employment opportunities as men do. In particular, there are 3 pieces of legislation that stand out. The one is the Labor Act of 2007, the Affirmative Action Employment Act 1998, and the Social Security Act. The Namibia's Labor Act of 2007 aims at regulating the conditions of employment of all employees without discrimination of sex, race, color, ethnic, social, or economic status. Namibia's Affirmative Action Act of 1998 requires employees to set an annual target to achieve equal representation of different groups of employees, including women in management positions. Further, it aims to reduce inequalities in employment and bring equal opportunities to all of us. This in accordance to the Article 10 and 23 of the Namibian Constitution. It aims at achieving gender balance in decision-making and fostering fairness in recruitment, selection, and appointment, training and promotion, and equitable remuneration of women. But just today, I just discovered an article in the newspaper which stated women paid less than men in the health sector. So looking at some statistic further on, there's some improvement going on in terms of employment rate of women. The National Labor Force Survey of 2008 stated about 49.9%, and in 2018 it increased to 69.8%, the participation of women in that labor force survey. So that's the statistic, but let's keep the statistic away and rather look on the situation on the ground, at the workplace itself. Does it really speak to the legal framework? Ladies and gentlemen, today we will unpack this topic, looking closer at the challenges women affecting at workplace. Also to look at well-established best practice examples in the private and public sector. What about equal wages, part-time work, returning after maternity leave, flexibility in regard of home office and digitalization, reliable childcare facilities for preschool kids, reliable and safe transport, just to mention a few issues around this topic. The situation might be different in urban areas than to rural areas. And we have also to consider that women are likely to work in the informal sector than in the formal sector. To put it simple, women's livelihood are more vulnerable to changes and not always corresponding to balance family and business duties together. So we have to do something about it. What about GBV? Is it also happening in the working environment? And are systems implemented to address and to prevent, since the relationship in workplace is different than in a private? For sure, unemployment and gender-biased workplaces has negative impact on human well-being. That is without question. But I think there's another question beyond ideology and traditional gender roles to draw into the floor today. Women enjoying education, many of them have an academic degree, and the percentage are even higher than men. Can the nation afford and allow to lose this generation of qualified workers, or to bring it up to a macroeconomic level, not to have this contribution to GDP, and not to call up all resources and potentials to develop the nation? I think we all agree that women play a critical role in society. How their conditions in workplace be improved and eradicate the imbalances, that's the question we are discussing today. Ladies and gentlemen, the discussion tonight is an opportunity to delve deep into issues affecting women in the workplace. We can discuss openly and freely, advise each other, and enhance on a common understanding in how we can collectively contribute to improving the working environment for women. Feel welcome and comfortable to discuss the crucial topic. To put some meat on the bone and facts to the discussion, we have invited some experts and the Honorable Minister itself that are dealing with this issue on their daily basis. Our office of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation shall not only remain as an office for such. It should be open to the public to meet, to greet, to network, to exchange ideas, and I hope we will have a lot of activities such as this. It's simply to say, to bring public closer to our space and also to our team. I'm wishing you a fruitful engagement and hopefully a good platform to network. Thank you very much. I hand over to you.
Thank you, Frau Roosman, for the good welcome and also for setting the tone and also for highlighting some of the key issues that we are going to be looking at tonight. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, allow me now to pose the first question. I will invite the panel to look at the challenges affecting women in the workplace. If we are saying that women in the workplace are facing a number of challenges, what are those challenges? I will invite, departing with the Honorable Minister, to briefly look at some of the challenges. You may remain seated because you're already mic'd up, and then you could pass on to Kayla and to Natasha. So what are we talking about when we are saying women challenges they are facing in the workplace?
Thank you very much. I think a conversation that's continuing to happen in our community and in our society is about whether or not the question of gender equality and the progression in questions of gender equality has stagnated. Is something that now keeps happening. I also know, before the National Assembly went on recess, one of the motions that were brought by a member of the opposition, and that was actively participated in by all members of the National Assembly, regardless of a political affiliation, was the question of the situation of women in politics and decision-making. And it tells me, and also when I saw the topic, I thought, why are we all of a sudden, maybe not all of a sudden, but I think why are we increasingly having these conversations? Why is it something that we're thinking about a bit more in recent years? And I like the fact that, in your opening remarks, you make the point that statistics is one thing. You will also see from our interventions and the preparations, all of us are using similar data. We have access to the same sources. So much of the information is also quite repetitive. But one of the things I've learned from people that go to church is that things are repeated and talked about continuously because the situation has not changed significantly. And when I say that, I'm not saying the situation for women in the workplace has not changed significantly in Namibia. It has. If you look at the past 30 years, there has been tremendous progress made. And I think everybody, whether you're a scholar, you're an activist, you're a student, you're a youth person, you know that there has been some change that we have seen. But there are some areas that have remained the same. Last week, and that's why I know the conversation is happening for a while now. Last week I was also providing some training to the National Council members who in Swakopmund. And believe it or not, there was only one woman in the training. You know, the rest of them were male persons. And the conversation really should happen among all of us. But what I continue to hear, and maybe that's something that we need to interrogate, is that the male person is being emasculated. We are emasculating the boy child. And my view on that first point is that emasculation is happening on the basis that we are assuming that males or men should be in a particular position in society. For instance, if you have an all-male board, for example, you typically, nobody will see that there's something wrong. But once you have an all-female board, for example, you will have those conversations about, men are now becoming marginalized and so forth. So those are the kinds of conversations we should worry about. If more than 50% of the employed population of Namibia are women, then why do we have that gender gap? If you are more, shouldn't you then be represented more? Is really the question we should be asking. But let me focus a little bit on the legal aspects, because much of the statistics and my written speech is available if anyone wants to see what the statistics look like. And I think they look quite good, actually, on the face of it. But when you look at, so let me just maybe focus a little bit on what I've written so that I don't lose my thoughts, is that, it is a fact that systemic inequality is still present in our society today. And discriminatory hiring practices keep women out of the highest ranking positions. And it's not, in some instances, it's not even deliberate. But pervasive sexism contributes to burnout and lack of career advancement, and the persistent lack of access to family planning, childcare options, and workplace flexibility interferes with the ability of women to participate in the workforce. Additionally, women in all facets of Namibian society continue to be afflicted by gender-based violence and harassment. And when you have a blue eye, when you are subject to domestic violence, you are likely to stay out of work continuously because you are embarrassed, you are uncomfortable. And even when you go, and when you go to work and you have a blue eye, for example, I was part of a blue eye campaign last year. Even when you have a blue eye, people are uncomfortable to ask you what is wrong. And I asked people, because I went to work with a blue eye, no one asked me. But I could see the uncomfortability between, people are looking at me thinking, yeah, what's happening with the minister? Has she, shame, feeling sorry for you, but no one has the guts. And it's that silence that keeps many of our women in the back room, so to speak. The other issue is, if you look at the mining sector, for example, I have a friend who's a lady, very good at what she does, and she works at the mine with her husband. And typically, and if you know the mining sector and how they work, at the mines, the people who get the most money are those that work overtime and at night. That's where the money is. But because she has a small child, they had to make a decision about who's going to work overtime, so that person brings in more money on behalf of us. But that you are placed as a woman basically to make that choice to remain at home, even though you'd like to be the one that brings most of the money to the fore. So these are the kinds of things, very nuanced, but that you start to pick up about the situation of women in the workplace. But more broadly, outdated gender norms and stereotypes remain infused in the fabric of our society, whether we like it or not. As I mentioned at the outset, the government is obligated by Article 95 of the Constitution to legislate efforts to further equality and to eradicate the practical barriers to female workplace participation, including sexism, discrimination, and a lack of support for working mothers. Many pieces of legislation have been passed since independence in fulfillment of this obligation, and I would like to take a closer look at some of the most significant. Preamble and Article 10 of the Namibian Constitution guarantees equal treatment and freedom from discrimination, and Article 95, in addition to requiring the government to legislate, also mandates maternity leave and efforts to close the gender pay gap. The former is established in the regulations to the Social Security Act, which entitles Namibian mothers to 14 weeks of paid parental leave following the birth of a child. While this compares favorably to some other countries, many countries guarantee a year or more paid parental leave to new mothers. Moreover, once mothers return to work, they are somehow expected to balance working life with domestic work, of which women are still expected to carry out at the vast majority of spaces. In the 2010 Namibian National Gender Policy, it seeks to address more systemic matters like this. It prohibits the denial of opportunities to women due to pregnancy, breastfeeding, or family responsibility. We've seen recently in hiring opportunities, people have indicated you must not be pregnant or you must go through a pregnancy test. And you got to ask yourself, you know, what does that mean for pregnant women, for instance? You know, because I'm guessing the pregnancy, you may not go to battle, for instance, if you are in the military, but you can be in the reception. You know, there should be other things that you can do, but purely on that basis, you may already feel that you are being excluded. So these are important conversations that we really need to have as scholars, as academics, and as activists. A similar principle is embodied in the preamble to the Labour Act, which includes the requirement to ensure equality of opportunity for women, particularly in relation to remuneration, and to provide for maternity leave too and employment security for women. Article 107 of that Act also explicitly prohibits unfair discrimination or harassment in employment or occupation. I can tell you it's not something that is common in the public domain, but I've had people, young candidate legal practitioners, female candidate legal practitioners coming to me and saying, I'm being harassed sexually by my principal. And if you ask them, you know, why didn't you do something when you were there? I wanted to finish my candidature. You know, similar incidents happen in other established institutions where people who go for apprenticeship, for internships and so forth are subjected to that kind of harassment. And because you have a situation where you need this job, you need to finish your articles, you need to finish your internship, for instance, so that you can either get admitted as a legal practitioner or, you know, be promoted as a medical practitioner, you hang in there. You know, if you really look at even globally what is happening around, increasingly women coming out many, many years later to say that when I was an actress in Hollywood, for instance, this is what I have been subjected to. If you look at what happened with the late Jeffrey Epstein and what he has subjected many women to, that Hollywood big guy, for instance, that was harassing women. We have cases here in Namibia of big corporates where many women have been subjected to sexual harassment, but people don't come out to talk because if you look at the unemployment rate and you're thinking that somebody's putting bread on your table, you're thinking what? You're thinking, I don't want to bite the hand that feeds my family, so you keep quiet. What we've done recently is we amended the Combating of Rape Act to include aspects on abuse of authority as something that you can be protected against in terms of our sexual violence legislation. I can see you are looking at me funny, so let me go to the end just to say some ideas. I can share the rest of the things. It's indirect, but so I do think that there are some opportunities that we have. You know, apart from the fact that we have a role to play as a state, I think there are opportunities for further legislation strengthening affirmative action in Namibia, also further expanding quotas to private organizations and requiring that women be considered as replacements for women in for men in high-profile roles in business, civil society, and government. And we're not talking about replacement as something of you taking out a man and simply putting in a woman. But when opportunities arise, you fill those opportunities up progressively with women. That's the one thing. Also, apart from the important role that we play as a government, what we would like to see is employers must provide flexibility for working mothers, and women in the country must have better access to family planning and childcare services. We must increasingly, I remember the speaker saying that we must create an atmosphere where female parliamentarians, whether it's in the National Council or in the National Assembly, should be able to be comfortable to come to Parliament or to the National Assembly in the afternoon, knowing that there is a childcare service available on the premises. Otherwise, you stay away because you're more concerned about the safety of your child. And then secondly, also, the state also has an essential role in ensuring equal opportunities, educational ones, and I know Kaylin will talk about that, for women, particularly training for women to occupy leadership positions. One of the things I've seen is that there isn't enough capacity building. I know that people think when you're placed in a position, you must have all the skills. It is not true. Even men, when they became presidents for the first time, I don't think they went to an academy where they were taught how to be president. Some things you just need to be placed in the position and provided with the opportunity for you, to be provided with the support. It's the same for any person in the workplace. When you give somebody a task, you want to know two things. The first thing that you want to know is, do they understand what they are supposed to do? And then secondly, what support do they need? Because without that support, how do we expect people to simply perform? Then also, I think there is opportunity for us to reform and expand maternity leave, allowing longer paid absence for new mothers, particularly if it's your first child. And in the interest of gender equality and passing some of the burdens of childcare onto men, we should also consider expanding parental leave to include fathers. And then finally, there are opportunities for further legislation that we can strengthen. And I think if we can provide the space for people to be capacitated to take on those responsibilities, regardless of where they find themselves. If you have the basic content knowledge, you should be able to lead any institution. And it shouldn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. We are stagnating at the moment. We are not pushing that envelope as further as we should to have more women, particularly in decision-making positions. And I'm particularly thinking about the courts and the benches, for example. We need an increasing number of women. We don't have any at the Supreme Court at the moment. We have to normally borrow a female from South Africa in order for that bench to look nice and colorful and diverse. But there's lots of opportunity in Namibia. The legal framework exists. Where there is limitations, we can always import all the international instruments that we have ratified and signed as Namibia, given what is expected of us. In the event that there are limitations locally, Article 144 of the Constitution require of us to import international instruments into our domestic legal framework to enhance the rights of particularly our women, but also the rights of our women, children, and our men. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for your good contribution. May I continue with Kaylin? Do you want to also touch on some of the challenges, maybe one or two?
Yeah, definitely. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, I'm Kaylin. Very happy to be here. Just as I start off, I just want to concur with Honorable Dalsap. It's true, we've come a long way, but there's still so much more to do and so much further we can go. I had an interview this morning, just briefly before I start, in terms of the challenges. I had an interview this morning with NBC, where one of the questions they had posed to me now during the interview is some of the challenges that we face. Have I faced any challenges or any sort of bullying, etc.? And we really try to bring it down to the layman's term as well, in terms of the everyday person. We also have audiences at home. So when I thought of challenges, which is what I like, if you speak about your own experience, you can never be wrong, you know. So when I think of challenges as a female, you know, one of the things that Honorable Dalsa mentioned it as well, is the underrepresentation. And the question was posed, if we're more, how come we're less? In terms of, and the higher the position, the less representation gets. And this is where the concept of the glass ceiling comes in. All right, I'm very familiar with the glass ceiling. And there may not be certain policy in place that prohibit women from reaching certain levels or certain senior positions, but it's something that's happening on a day-to-day basis. Okay. One of the other challenges, again, and was touched on as well, was the gender pay gap. Namibia is actually currently, according to the Global Gender Gap Report of 2021, we've actually moved up 35 positions, and we're number 6 currently ranked in the world in terms of addressing our gender pay gap, and we're currently number 1 in Africa. Again, a great position to be in, but it doesn't mean we should be stagnant, okay? And when we should also bear in mind, and I was reminded of this again this morning because I do the same thing. Whenever I compare Namibia, you know, whether it is transport or the banks or the taxis, I always compare it like, yeah, but we're better than, you know? So the country we choose to use as a baseline to compare ourselves against, it's always like a country that you're better than in terms of statistics. We never say we're better than country A, but we could be as good as country B. You know, so we should aim higher. You know, so even though we've been making progress, what we're saying is, you know, there needs to be a lot more work that needs to get done. Sexual harassment, it's Honorable Dalsa said there's going to be a few repetitions, so I'm not going to go into that too much. I think we're all aware of it. I know of people who've experienced it, and I've experienced it as well. Pregnancy discrimination. Pregnancy discrimination was also mentioned already. It's unfortunate, but it is still a matter of race and ethnicity, and that also plays a role for women in the workplace. And then one of the things that I've experienced, especially because I'm a young professional, I started my career in the film industry at a very young age. So I was 15 when I started, during school holidays, progressed, studied law. Honorable Dalsa was actually my lecturer. So, you know, it feels pretty amazing right now to sit here next to her and you're like, she taught me, I'm like, started from the bottom. So the other thing is really the underestimation, you know, of women in general. And what I have experienced is a challenge, especially because I'm young. So I currently serve on 5 boards, some parastatal, some NGOs. And then I'm a TV and film producer. And on some of the boards I've come across, especially when I'm a TV and film producer, we hire people. A lot of the people that I hire are older than I am. And I've noticed that it's quite difficult sometimes, especially for our male counterparts, to accept orders from not only a woman, but a younger woman. Okay. So those are things that I face, and in the boardroom as well, you know, where a chair, you know, might be slightly condescending and speak over you because of your youth. But I have a term, but I don't think that I'm allowed to say it, but it's BDE. And I feel because of my BDE, I don't allow anyone to walk over me. But that doesn't negate the fact that there are a lot of women who face challenges. Something with the sexual harassment, whether it's a gender pay gap, or whether it's something as minute as just ignoring you, you know, or not taking into account your opinion, you know. And we see it more and more. So I guess in terms of challenges, just to keep things, you know, in terms of the layman's and everything, I think that's some of the challenges that I would suggest that we're currently facing as women in the workforce.
Thank you, Kaylin. Natasha, let me come over to you. Some points to add?
Yes, thank you. I fully agree with what the 2 previous panelists have said. but I want to focus specifically on working in an environment where it's male-dominated. And, you know, the male-dominated issue is actually a history where it's coming from, because it is, in the past, corrections was mostly about locking and punishment. But now we have undergone a transformation journey, and I'm glad to say we have made good progress. We are really making good progress, but unfortunately, with all the good progress, there's also challenges again. So with the transformation journey, it had allowed more female officers to come on board, because we wanted now to focus more on rehabilitation, and rehabilitation is requesting and requiring now more skilled professional staff. Now what happened now is that in terms of the challenges we are facing as female officers is our offender population is also male dominated. So what happens is that, because I can just maybe share with you, the unlock for this morning was in the country, we had 4,136 male offenders in comparison to only 144 female offenders. So now you can already see, you know, the stress and the challenges that we experience through that. Now as NCS, we also have the mandate to present or ensure safe custody of offenders, but we also have to ensure the safety of our officers. So now what happens is that through the transformation journey, we have appointed more female officers, but now these female officers are not allowed, for example, to escort high security risk offenders. They always have to be accompanied by a male officer, or they at least have to be 2 female officers. This now have resulted in, when it comes to recruitment, what must we do now? Should we really appoint females because we want to be gender responsive? We want to create equality, but there's now challenges in terms of escorting or supervising or guarding these offenders. So this is the first point I wanted to share. The second point is just the general issue of being a female in a security sector. The service is really currently attracting a lot of female officers. And as I said, the transformation journey we are currently undergoing is like really trying to move forward in terms of ensuring the effective rehabilitation of offenders, ensure the effective reintegration into society. And we need to focus then on intervention strategies. And unfortunately, most of the qualifications that is required is human science, social work, psychology, law, and this is normally mostly done by the females. So this is really the stereotypes going along with female in general is also a concern. And I think we have touched on the sexual harassment. It's still also an issue in the security sector, because we are attracting this young, prominent, very excited young ladies that really wanted to start a career in corrections, but sometimes there is the issue of sexual harassment. And of course, we have disciplinary procedures in place. But as the Honorable has said, that sometimes people don't speak up about these things. It's still in silos. So this is also some of the challenges. The last point that I want to touch on is just the general working conditions. Because once you apply to be an officer in the correctional setup, you go for the same basic training, you are expected to do the same physical exercises, and when you are back at the facilities or the institutions, you are expected to do what other officers are doing. And this includes working shifts, working night shifts. Luckily, I think the Honorable will still touch on some of the legislations, but I know that, for example, the Labour Act at least make provision for staff members when they are pregnant, you know, not to be allowed to work night duties. But this is really a challenge, because sometimes you have to adjust schedules to accommodate the females. And as I said, you know, at the end of the day, it is like we want to allow, but it creates challenges. And this is maybe where there are still gaps on that.
Thank you for your contribution. So Kellen, you want to come back?
Just wanted to quickly add something. Honorable Dasa did mention it, but Natasha also just mentioned now again in terms of the sexual harassment and women not reporting it. But I think it's also very important to mention, and I'm speaking from experience here as well, that is also there's so much onus on women, you know, to report, to do this, to protect themselves, you know, to look over their shoulders, to be cautious. That we need to also encourage our institutions and our establishments, our employers, to create a safer space, to allow women to feel comfortable to do that. When many years ago, I think it's probably the first time I'll mention this publicly. Many years ago, when I was quite young, there was an incident where I was harassed by a family member. I told my parents immediately. And my parents took me to the police station to open a case. But I was quite young, you know. And the environment that I was greeted with and presented with, I looked at my parents and I told them, can we please go home? And that was the end of it. Because I had to walk into a police station. All I see was male officers. There was no safe room that I was taken into. There was no safe space. Everyone could hear, now you need to tell your trauma that you went through as a girl child, now in front of all these strange men. I'm sure things have changed since, but this was my experience, you know. So we need to, yes, you know, we need to report, but we also need to encourage our institutions to create a safe space where women feel comfortable enough to report something without the fear of repercussion.
Thank you very much. And I think at this juncture, I also want to encourage our participants and also our audience who are joining us via Facebook, also to, if you have questions, also to compose them. We'll come back and then we'll take questions. I know the Honorable Minister, you made a lot of points and you focused on the policy aspects. Do you still have some of the points you want to continue to look at more deeper into policies and laws?
Yes, please? So I want to maybe look a little bit at, I want to make 2 points before I go to that. There's a book that was written by I think she's the COO of Google, Sanderberg, I think, but she wrote a book called Lean In. And she makes 2 important points in that book that stuck with me. The one is, it's not enough for us to come to the table, because that's been the mantra for a while, you know, that we get to the table. But she was saying it's one thing to get to the table, and I remember even as chairperson of Law Reform, you know, when I was sitting at a table, there was always this thing, and many of us have experienced it, of people, particularly your male colleagues, asking you to make them tea. It really is a thing. That's the one thing. And then the second thing is, you know, we also as women, when even at an event like this, when people have finished eating, who's going to be the one cleaning up, staying behind? The guys have eaten and they leave. They don't care what that place looks like. But, you know, we end up cleaning and you know, you leave an hour later and so forth. But you're both lawyers, or you're both magistrates, or you're both professionals in your own capacity. And I think it's important. But the second, and for me a more important point that she makes in that book is the fact that when you are in a position, and Angela Davis also made this point many years ago in the 80s, when she wrote a book on race, work, and politics. She made the point that it's very important for particularly women, when you are in positions of leadership, when you're in positions of power, it's to create opportunities for other women. And it's something we don't do often. You know, if you ask any woman now, I mean, not any woman, but some women, if you ask them now, are we ready for a female president? They are likely to say no. You know, and they will tell you that they will not vote for a female president. And it's not that because they don't, it's a question about knowledge. It's a question about consciousness and awareness. What I find is that much of what we don't know, you know, men come to meetings prepared, some women too, you know, but we take a lot of the knowledge gaining for granted. We take, you know, because in an event like this, you know, I see that there are lots of young females in the audience, and it could be because of the topic, but typically I find that women, even women around me, don't like after hours events. This is where the deals are made, this is where people make networks, this is where the conversations happen, this is where you expand your knowledge on particular issues. But also, we limit ourselves to the kinds of topics and events that we attend. So anything that has to do with investment and green hydrogen now, we don't want to go, but talk about insights on women, that's where we're going to go, because that's what we resonate with. And I think we need to realign our thinking to start empowering ourselves on other issues. Filmmaking, for example, is something that we don't venture into. We are actresses, but we don't want to produce. And the more established jurisdictions will tell you that there is opportunities in that way. But what I just want to make two more points, and the first one is policy really drives the agenda of government on any particular issue, and I think our government must be applauded for its commitment right at the beginning, from the start of the Women's Directorate in the Office of the President. That shows political will. But I think there's been some retrogression. Particularly, I find, in the private sector, we haven't seen a lot of movement, upward mobility. And I think the point that Caitlin makes is very valid. The upper you go, the higher you go, the less you see women folk. But if you look at the Labor Act, if you look at the Social Security Act, if you look at the Affirmative Action Act, the policy and legal frameworks exist. Where we have a problem is implementation. How if you really just study, I haven't done it, but I'm imagining that if you really look at the reports that people receive from employment institutions on affirmative action, I think if you really study, if you analyze that data, that information, those reports, you will probably see that there's been either a retrogression or just a stagnation in terms of affirmative action generally, whether it's in respect of women, whether it's in respect of persons with disabilities, or whether it's previously disadvantaged Namibians. So there's a lot of conversations that need to happen. If you talk about gender equality, you must talk about racial discrimination. You must talk about tribalism. You must talk about economic disempowerment. So the various issues are interlinked, in the moment, because if somebody doesn't see, if somebody believes that apartheid was wrong, then they must believe that there's something wrong with a lopsided picture of our equality paradigm in the country, for example. Then they must see something wrong with tribalism. Then they must see something wrong with sexism, for example. They must see everything wrong with any form of discrimination, because those struggles are all interrelated.
Thank you very much. I want to come back to you, Natasha, and I want you to look at a little bit on equality and good governance in the workplace, especially taking on from where the minister actually left off. And maybe take a little bit brief just to highlight some of the issues, especially on the subject.
Okay. I think there's also an issue, sometimes I think there's a concern or a challenge that people struggle to understand the link between equality and equity. Sometimes we are pushing for equality, but we actually create more challenges because people don't really understand what we refer to when we talk about equality. Equality, in a nutshell, refers to providing the same opportunities, the same resources, the same level of support to the same people. But when you look at equity, it's yes, providing opportunities. But you need to understand that there are different levels of support and resources that must be assigned to that specific person. Now, I think in terms of, and I'm really here today also to tell more about correctional service, because I think most people are not very familiar and acquainted with what is really happening in the security sector, but especially today in terms of the Namibian Correctional Service. We have really made some good strides. I have some statistics in terms of, good governance can really be achieved if you don't understand the link between equality and equity. And I think we, as a correctional service in the last few years, have been making really good strides. In terms of our total workforce, which is it's not much, but it's about 2,589. Now, 54 of that workforce is male officers, while 46 is female officers, which just give an idea that, you know, the difference is not that much. And this is because we are considering, yes, when we are advertising, we look at what are the specific roles and responsibilities and expectations of that specific position. And then when it comes to the interview, we now assess really your capabilities to really get the position. And so you can't just give people, because they all have a degree in psychology, give them the same opportunity. You really have to do a proper assessment, a proper analysis to make sure that you appoint the right people. To go further, in terms of our top management, and I'm talking about the decision makers in our organization, there is like 4 positions, and 2 of those positions are represented by females, which means that in the correctional service, we currently have the 50-50 representation, which I think it is rare in other organizations, but it really depends also maybe in the terms of the structure of the organization and also where you are at a certain point in time. And I know that, you know, it's not to compare with other ministries, but I think it's just important to mention. So just to conclude on that area, I think in terms of pay gaps, you know, people shouldn't look at only at gender. Sometimes it's really based on the position you hold, and if clear structures are in place and there's clear procedures in place in terms of recruitment, I think maybe we might minimize the issue of equality, either of underrepresentation.
But can I?
Yes, please.
Because I think that's, you see, I always thought, and I want to just say that in support of what you were saying about equity and equality, I do want to just clarify that we are all familiar with formal versus substantive equality, and I think the challenge has always been substantive equality. Formal, the laws are there, the policies are there, the institutional arrangements are in place, but the substantive equality doesn't always take into account that a woman gets pregnant, for instance, and she gets a period, for example, and she breastfeeds. And for you to bring her on par with your male counterpart, you must take care of those things. You must provide what we call in the disability paradigm, what we refer to reasonable accommodation. So for example, you know, if a woman has just given birth and after 4 weeks the child is still young, you know, you should be able to say to her with no qualms that she can work from home, you know, for the duration of 6 months in order for her to be present with her child and so forth. You know, but then you can't have a gentleman come and say to you then, you know, I also want to work from home for 6 months because Yvonne is working from home. So that's where you have a problem. I mean, that's why tennis players are fighting for it. That's why soccer players, you know, are fighting for it. We are all chasing that ball. Why must there be a pay gap between me and him? You know, we all need to score. We all need to do certain things in that space. And I think that's where the challenge is. The challenge is not equity and equality. The challenge is what kind of arrangements are we putting in place to ensure that that equity happens.
Thank you very much. I know, Kellen, you want to come in, but I think I have to also be fair to the audience. I know you also want to do a short presentation on skills development and opportunities as well. Maybe what I would like, just for the sake of fairness, let's allow you to do a 5 minutes presentation. And then after that, we open up the questions for the audience and also for our Facebook audience as well. I think we'll do the 5 minutes presentation. Yeah, it will come down. The screen will come down quickly. Yeah.
Yolikeye menara Yesusu mnashalo. Eye omwashe watate njambi mea menyando. Mesia omunashalo. Twaunja ule kongutukirowe. Hallelujah Mesia.
Hi. Okay, I was going to go on without the mic and project my voice, and then as I wanted to say hi, the mic came on. Perfect timing, guys. Thank you very much. Hey. All right, but since seeing that we are officially on a clock, I'll keep it brief. I really need to discuss just a little bit in terms of continued education and skill development. And this is obviously now for women and for the girl child and in Namibia. So I think it's extremely important and it's critical to every country's development. It's the education of women. It's as important, as effective as a medicine that we use to cure an illness, or vaccination, something we're all quite too familiar with at the moment. It has been said time and time again, like once you have an educated woman, behind every successful man there's a successful woman, or whichever way they want to put it now. I see us young women, we take the lead, we take the charge, but only because we've had predecessors before us who made things a lot easier for us in terms of our introduction. I mentioned before that I was privileged enough to be taught by Honorable Dausap during my legal studies. And again, to have someone of such stature, strong female woman, and to see someone like that hold the position that she does, further motivates us, to do more. But then the question also lies in terms of what opportunities are there available, So I just jotted down a few things in terms of what I've made use of, and later, I'll probably skip that, so I might as well start with that. I put in a case study, which is the case study of myself. Okay, I went to a German private school in Swakopmund, 100% scholarship child. Also very proud of it. And then I did my law degree after, and thank you to NASFAF for paying for that as well. Appreciate it. You didn't get enough appreciate. I got the grant, ma'am, which means I don't pay back. After that, started doing research, did my law degree, but I was already in the film industry, decided, but I don't want to do law because I think that there's more lawyers than criminals sometimes in Namibia, and it's just such an oversaturated industry at the moment. But growing up, you think what I want to become is doctor, lawyer, psychologist, it's like all of these very traditional careers that we choose. But when I was 15 years old, there was a film in Swakopmund that was being shot, was the Wesley Snipes film. And I was in school holiday and I walked in and the first person I saw was a woman. I said, hire me. And it turned out that she was the writer of the script. So the entire school holiday, I worked on the Wesley Snipes film, and that's where I started. All throughout my studies, I was a runner. I ran and gave tea to everyone, handed out call sheets. studied law, progressed, traveled the world working, and now I produce TV commercials, feature films, etc., etc. But I did not know at the time this was even a career option because we were only told the traditional, much to the dismay of my mother because she doesn't understand why do I have a law degree and I do not use it. Okay. But I think now they understand that when you're in the arts, it doesn't mean you're artsy. The arts, especially the film industry, is an extremely competitive and a highly lucrative industry. We must just, catch on a little bit in Namibia. Okay. So what I use, there's a platform called Namibia Opportunities. I'm not sure, how many of you are familiar with it? 1, 2, Hilma, Moses, 3. Yeah. The young people. They have a website, a Facebook page, an Instagram page, the works. Even WhatsApp groups. Every single job opportunity, scholarship, fellowship, doesn't matter, they post there. So I got through that. I participated after my law degree. I went to Washington, D.C. to do my fellowship in public management. And I finished it there, also something I found on the platform. I got accepted a month ago for my master's. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I got accepted a month ago for my master's. It's a master's in international anti-corruption studies in Vienna, Austria. They gave me a partial scholarship, and I'm using this platform to get the balance of the money for me to go. But that, for instance, I found on Opportunities for Africans, like at the website that I use. They are Project Hope. I know that they just finished the Dreams project, where they educated and assisted, I think, 560 young girls, young women, through vocational training, for instance. I spoke to the NTA, and I'm presenting at the NTA in a month or two as well, to their Women's League, about the opportunities for vocational training for women there as well. VTC, you name it, internships. The embassies, another scholarship that I got was from the German embassy, DART, actually. Decided not to go that route and rather do the anti-corruption route. But I was lucky enough in the fact that, I got the scholarship to go to this great school. But all of this is possible, but clearly there's still an issue somewhere, where there's a bottleneck form, why aren't we making use? And this is like 5 platforms, and they're countless ones, okay? But these are the ones that I make use of. But you can only make use of these once you have done certain things, like go to school. But clearly we still have a problem, okay, when it comes to the education of our girl child and our young girls. So skill development, if you really think about it, means a process which enables trainees and the working age people to gain access to dexterity, knowledge, and ability. Professional development was what we continuously do to improve our position. But some of the things that hinder us from doing that is, 1, stereotypes that hinder the girl child's education, which is the stereotypes itself. Where stereotypes include that your place is at home. I think we mentioned it earlier as well. Your place is to take care of the family. We have the lack of support for the girl child. Honorable Dawson can maybe assist me here. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that there are 4 countries in Africa currently that don't allow their learners to come back to school after they've given birth. And I think we have a temporary policy in place that does allow it, but still temporary, Is it not? Great, this is why I said Honorable Dawson will assist me there. But now we have that policy in place. It was temporary at some point. But that lack of support with the girl child is extremely important. Okay, and then we have
But I can tell you the one challenge with that is that the boy continues to go to school, and the pregnant girl at some point is pulled out. And actually, there's been a proposal that the moment the girl child is leaving school, the boy must also follow. He cannot just enjoy the fruits.
Yeah. No, I read that as well, and that's true. So at the end, what happens in any case is that the girl child leaves, stays at home, and does all of that. Okay. So those are some of the stuff that hinders us. So there might be these opportunities available, but if you were not afforded those opportunities, yes, a right to education, it's a right, it's not a privilege. But certain lack of policies or lack of support for the girl child doesn't even allow you to access that. So if you can't even access that, the basic education, how do we propose you can make use of any of these opportunities? Okay. So just again, that there should be a higher onus or more pressure or emphasis put on the importance of educating the girl child. Okay. Education in motion. Okay, about 5 minutes is almost up, so I'll just go through it very quickly. Two more. Okay, so during my preparation for this, just in general, when a woman is educated, it allows for economic development and prosperity. We know this time and time and time again. We've been told, we understand the importance of it. It allows for economic empowerment. There's obviously different levels of education, but the one thing that I always lacked was my financial intelligence. I'm horrible with money, or at least I was. Make money, spend money. I think maybe I used to say it comes from a place because I didn't grow up with much, and now that I have it, but only later in life did I really understand what financial intelligence means and how to work. So in that aspect, I wasn't financially literate. It's one of the things, so economic empowerment, comes in different ways and forms. Obviously, one of those things is once you're educated, your skills have been developed, you stand in a position where you can make informed decisions and partake in public discussions surrounding policies, laws, and regulations that will affect your life as a young woman in Namibia. Improved life and justice, we have there. Improved health and choices, and dignity and honor. Okay. So dignity and honor, when I put that there, I wanted to also mention that it doesn't mean that in the absence of certain skill that you don't have that. Okay. But I mentioned earlier when I was sitting in the chair and I said I've got BDE, big energy. Yes. But that also comes, but that also comes with a certain level of my parents pushed me, the education. I've achieved a certain level of success in my field. I've had really strong women to look up to, my mom, my teachers, and they've been encouraging. And again, when we spoke about, Honorable Dasa mentioned it as well, when you are a woman in a position of power, there's responsibility on you to create opportunities for those who come after you. Okay? And we do not do that enough. We complain, but we work in isolation out of fear for all of us individually will know why we fear that. Okay, but we can only hope to achieve progress if we work together collectively. This case study I've already said, that was basically just in terms of where I started and where I'm at and the opportunities that have been availed to me. And I'd also like to very proudly say, that as a young Namibian female, most of my education, has been paid for. Not my parents because they can't afford it, scholarships, bursaries, but only things that I was able or open to me because, we have to work hard, sometimes harder than our male counterparts just to prove something. All right. Towards my last minute, the seeds of success in every nation on earth are best planted in women and in children. And Joyce Banda said that, and I couldn't agree more. When I mentioned in terms of working together, looking at the education sector, I'm not sure what our situation currently is with our educational system. I know that they're reviewing some policies there again, but we can't work in isolation. The private sector, the government, the educational sector, consultations with the people in terms of what the best practices are to fit Namibia, not a copy and paste in terms of educational system. We need to be able to do that. Okay. Education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. All right. And this goes not only, from the grassroots up in terms of our education, in terms of primary school, as well as our skills development moving forward into the female workforce. And we need to continuously make sure that we do professional development and support our young women as well in terms of mentorships, taking them under our wing and providing opportunities for them. All right, thank you guys very much. Was that quick enough?
Thank you, Kaylin. I think now at this juncture we are going to invite our audience, both on Facebook and also live audience here present, just to make some comments or you have questions, and let's talk. Let's have a conversation. After all, it's a conversation. So please, I'm sure we have got a lot of experiences in our lives that we have seen, that we have encountered. So what are those? Let's have a conversation. Please, number one, Elago.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Annelie Pangelwa. I'm the Managing Director at Lago Medical Supplies. I'd actually just like to comment on something, or at least partially comment, partially inquire on something that Honorable Minister, you said. I'm quoting you. You said women do not like attending after-hour meetings. So I'm 21, and something my friends and I do is we try to think about situations holistically from every perspective. And something that we discuss is sometimes vocabulary aids things that we are speaking against. So both of you, Ms. Kaylin as well, talked about nuances and glass ceilings. And something that I'd like to add on that is about boys' clubs. So it's important when we think about things like do not like to attend after our meetings. Women are very pivotal in the education and the protection of the girl child. So as a mother working from 8 to 5, I think it's important that a lot of women are constantly thinking about their children, about if they're safe at home, about if they're going to eat, about, you know, random irrational fears, even like if someone broke into the house. So it's very, my mother ran from work all the time. So I think that it's important to understand that these after-hour meetings are not feasible for these women, because that's 4 or 5 more hours that they would be away from their children without really being able to ensure their safety. And some of these after-hour meetings are also posed as extracurricular activities that are very gendered. In a Namibian platform, for example, golfing, you know, on Saturdays, the managers and the CEOs go to golf, and in the office space, it's as if they're just going to go play golf, but that is where most of the talk is made. And as women, it's kind of like you are shushed. We're just going to go golf. And then you come in on Monday and there's been a big change, but you were never given the opportunity to be there. So I think that it's important that we realize that some of these after-hour activities are glass ceiling tactics, and we need to just encourage the people that do orchestrate these meetings to make them a space for women to come to, because they don't need to be after hours. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And also, we shouldn't forget in our conversation that we also have a lot of women who are participating in the informal economy, and also we are not part of the education process, who didn't have the benefit also to benefit from the education system, and also who are affected by some of the challenges that we're discussing tonight.
But it's interesting, if I may, and I think I don't want to take anything away from what you said, because I think you make a very, very important point around the kinds of spaces that are created and why sometimes women can't participate. In 1997, in a case called the President of the Republic of South Africa versus Ugo. Now, Mr. Ugo was also a prisoner. And what the former president, late Nelson Mandela, did, like our president does every year, either before independence and so forth, they pardon certain prisoners. So typically, it's either persons with disabilities, women with children, and so forth. And Mr. Ugo had a child, but he was not released. It was only women that were released, and he sued the president in his capacity, obviously. But there was what we call a minority judgment by then Justice Kriegler, I think. And he made one point, which is something that we want to move away from as women, is that stereotyping of that women we are naturally, because you give birth, you are a nurturer, you are a caretaker, and the women in that case were described in a soft fashion. Of course, the women's and the feminist groups were up in arms about that minority view, but it's the reality. And what you remind me of is that support that we're talking about. You know, if you know, what is it? Is it Rome? If whatever can come to you, take it to the space. So I want to agree with you that there are lots of gendered spaces that have been created. There's still a lot. We are all still steeped in patriarchal thinking, even as women ourselves. So until we liberate ourselves about what kind of spaces we can actually take, it will be a lost battle. you know. But we have to start somewhere, I suppose.
Thank you very much. Let me take one more, two more, please. Let's be very brief and straight to the point.
Good evening. My name is Petrina Emmanuel. I'm a TAL facilitator, also part of the 2022 KAS intake. I'm a Commerce Region Coordinator as well as a Deputy Secretary General for Student Union of Namibia. Gender diversity is indeed important and plausible. Ensuring equal representation of women in the workplace can have positive effects all across. I actually concur with the minister that sexism is wrong. Indeed, the government has put in place policies that are standing for women and empowering them. My question today is, what is your say on women that are taking advantage of the current empowerment programs and becoming too comfortable, that make it too obvious that men deserve certain positions?
Thank you very much. I also saw Ms. Black at the back. You also want to...
I won't be long at all. Good evening, everybody. My question maybe is for everybody, but very specifically also for the Honorable Minister. When we say that we have amazing policies in place, and we do, but we don't see it translated in our workplaces, in our daily lives, we have an implementation issue. Does that mean that the Equity Commission, are they failing us? Because why is it that we say that, and I'm thinking this, the race aspect, but also gender. If we say that we are minority, but we're not represented at leadership, in leadership roles, and we are skilled, why is it that we are not getting to those places? The policies are there, we're doing everything that they say we should do. We are parenting, we're getting educated, we're doing everything, we're working hard, we're not getting the promotions, we're not taking up space. Is the Employment Equity Commission, are they failing us? Because I'm being disenchanted with the workspace.
Thank you very much.
That's my question, thank you.
Thank you. Let me come over here. I want to take as many questions from the floor and then allow you to...
Because I've forgotten the first one.
All right, so it's actually just about, in your presentation, you mentioned the public choice, the public health choice. It was just there. I would just like to discuss on the topic on abortion and how far are we, Honorable Dowsep, when it comes to the abortion, the motion that has to be passed in Parliament, how far are we with that discussion? And will it happen in the next 5 years?
Thank you very much. I also want to find out if we have maybe some questions from our audience on Facebook. No. Okay, let me allow the panel to just come in there to respond to the questions that has been raised.
I have forgotten the young lady's question, but I think Caitlin wants to respond to that.
Okay.
But only if you could just repeat your question quickly, please.
Just the last part, the actual
What is your say on women that are taking advantage of the current empowerment programs and policies put in place that make it too obvious that men deserve certain positions?
So I'm not 100% sure if I follow your question, because I'm not sure what makes it too obvious that women, after men, deserve certain positions. But my opinion as it relates to young women taking advantage of opportunities, I'm like, hell yeah. You know, I presented now and I mentioned that a lot of what I've been able to do was, one, I was probably just luck, but two, I took advantage, you know. We keep speaking about, you know, again and again, are we as women ready to take, are we as women ready to take a seat at the table? You know, are we ready to take a seat at the table? We want the seat, but are we ready? Earlier in the discussion, someone mentioned about the female president of Namibia, and it's funny because Dennis and I had a discussion about this on Tuesday, where I posed to him, and I also asked him, Dennis, do you think we are ready for a first female president? And when I say we, I mean in terms of Namibia. And it was very interesting, the thought processes that came out of that. But I mentioned also to Claudia, she's also from KAS, and it was just a joke, you know. I mean, it's. I actually partook this year in the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, the KAS Talent Empowerment Program, the first week of their workshop. I think it's one of a few weeks. This was the first one that took place, I think, a month or two ago. And every young person there, especially young female, you know, was there because they took advantage of an opportunity. I'm also an alum of the US Embassy because I did my fellowship at Howard University. I'm a Mandela Washington Fellow alum. And every year I get invited to read applications and score them to then see who's the next batch of young Namibians going to the States for their fellowship. And then every year we see discrepancies between male and female applications and the strength therein as well. And then we also see discrepancy in terms of the quality of the applications. But again, at least they're trying and they're making use of what's available to them. So when you're making a use of opportunities, or you're grabbing them, or you're speaking out, I always find it that people who do that and they do so unambiguously with no inhibitions whatsoever, kudos to them for doing that. Yeah. I don't understand the last part of your question about I have to admit.
Thank you very much, Kaylan.
Just a quick question from my side is, the debate has always been around what is readiness, you know. For example, when the male person or the boy child is doing certain things, what is it, you know, how have they been prepared, for instance, and therefore what else must you do with the women to get them ready? So that's for me, that's a big question that we all need to really think about. And then also, when you talk about failing, really who is failing who? Particularly if the policy framework is in place. I mean, there are lots of challenges even in the public sector around implementation. There is the question around the turnover of public servants, you know, because your public servant is or civil servants implement policy at an operational level. Because there's a political level and there's a functional or operational level. So, you know, even if you have very good intentions as an equity commissioner, and I must disclaim that I'm not even an expert actually on labor issues. When I really looked at the topic, I thought it should probably have been someone from the Ministry of Labor. But I mean, these issues are cross-cutting, so we are able to have a conversation around it. But, you know, and then you have also the turnaround of ministers every 5 years. Every 5 years, priorities change, for example. So, you know, the president tells the minister, this is what I'm expecting you to do, because really this is what our manifesto says. So over the next 5 years, this is what we're planning to do. So that also impacts a little bit on implementation. And then, of course, you have a lot of resource challenges. You know, depending on how much money you are allocated as a ministry, that may impact your implementation program. So I don't want to make a conclusion that the Equity Commissioner has failed. What I do think that I want to make a conclusion, it's not the Equity Commissioner and the Affirmative Action Commission or the Equity Commission is really just there to be a watchdog. But the real will should be coming from institutions, whether it's private or public sector institutions. You must have, and it really comes to issues like succession planning, you know, where companies say, corporates should be able to say, over the next 10 years, the next person that's going to be taking over is X, Y, and Z. And I think the banks actually are doing well when it comes to really pushing women to the fore. So I think that for me would be the key indicators of what your outcome would be when it comes to equity in the workspace. And I know that I'm not satisfactorily answering the question because it's not an easy question. The workforce environment and the debate around equality and equity is very complex. It has lots and lots of structural barriers. I was just thinking, when you said about there are lots of women in the informal economy, it's true, but where does that money go? That money is not going to build an empire. It's to pay school fees, to feed the family, you know. So the woman's, even in the informal economy, the income of the woman is continuously being consumed in the family space, whereas the income of the man seems to be spent to expand the external environment. And that's where the decision-making happens. That's where people create SMEs and companies and businesses, you know. That's where the conversation happens. So it really, and I think it's because there is a lot of limiting beliefs, even on the part of us as young females or as older generation females, you don't have the confidence to make those adjustments, because we have been oriented socially and otherwise to worry about our children. So the men he's standing here right now, if he has a baby, he's not concerned, even if it's a child that is not breastfeeding, because there are alternative ways of taking care of children, for instance. So it's all of those things. So it's very, very complex, but also the structural challenges that you face. So until we break down those barriers, it's going to be a difficult conversation. An easy response, the abortion bill was dealt with at committee level in the National Assembly. They have gone around. What typically happens is, I suspect in the next session, which will start in September, of the National Assembly, the committee would present a report to the National Assembly. That report would be considered. There'll be a debate. I suspect there'll be a huge debate that takes place. And they would normally have some recommendations. Assembly would make recommendations, and those recommendations would either be converted into policy, and then either complete repeal of the legislation, or an amendment, or some adjustments, that will reflect the concerns of the Namibian population.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Natasha, you want to come in there as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the point of, what are we doing? Because we are saying that the government has done well in terms of developing policies. But what are we doing? What are the reasons why these policies are not implemented? And I think it comes back to the drawing board to say that, okay, who's responsible? Because sometimes we keep the organization responsible, and yes, they are responsible because they are at certain mandates. And we have to focus on, I have made a point here to say that, it is important, if we want to ensure the implementation, that it's maybe important to have a designated office at a specific workplace assigned to that task to ensure that those policies are implemented. Because I was just thinking when the Honorable Tausip was also speaking to say that, so what are we doing wrong? Because if we have good policies, where are these policies? Because sometimes me as Commissioner Boyson, I'm also not aware of all the policies because my focus or my office is focusing on certain areas. But maybe if you have a designated office, and I know that the NCS also have recently, from 2019, have a gender mainstreaming office, that office take responsibility to make sure that these policies are implemented and they are kept accountable for actually producing reports or progress on these issues. But secondly, I think as individuals, as women, I think we really need to start setting up, the trend, because we are saying women in the informal settlement, what are they doing? But what are we in general as women doing together to make sure, are we going to get educated about these policies? Are we going to ensure that we are familiarizing ourselves on what is available and take it to the next level? But the policies are there, so what is the next step?
Thank you very much, Natasha. I also like your argument because within the implementation, I think one of the concerns is the fact that even if you don't implement the policy as an institution, what are the consequences?
Yes,
the enforcement thereafter. Kaylin, I want to actually come to you. Do you also want to contribute to the debate a little bit on the issue that has been raised from the floor?
I agree with both what Honorable Dalsop said as well as Natasha as well, especially in terms of the implementation aspects thereof. But I think also like in any other sector, non-governmental now, private sector, when you take over a position and there's a project, there's continuation that happens. And the same should happen in government as well. I understand that every minister that comes in, you come in with a different agenda. You want to pursue this, you want to pursue this, and that's fine. But the project that was started beforehand should be run to completion, and we should ensure that that happens. So when we have a policy officer, whatever, someone in an institution, there should be also oversight in government to make sure that what has been done by the previous line minister gets continued. It can't be like now we start this program, and then 5 years time we start a whole new program, and then suddenly we disregard this policy. Okay, and again, we've got great policies, you're right. Namibia also has one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. It's a gorgeous constitution also, hey? It's I mean, it's the only one that protects, environmental protection, one of the first in Africa to do that, amongst other things. But those are all beautiful words, and the same thing comes with accountability and repercussions. We will keep doing things and keep failing to do certain things if I'm not being held accountable for not doing them.
Thank you very much.
Just to say on account, continuation is important. But when you are in a policy position, typically what your beliefs are also has an impact on what you prioritize. So even if the programs exist, if, for example, I mean, it does happen. There is a certain attitude around gender equality and women's empowerment, particularly from our male counterparts. There are some who have very strong views that are progressive and that allows for women's empowerment, but there are also men that have been socialized in a particular fashion. There are women who've been socialized in a particular fashion. So if your belief system, if your convictions don't prioritize certain things, it is likely to be impacted. It will get done, but on the list, it may be number 9 or number 10 on the list. And then over a 5-year period, you don't have enough time to implement everything. So the point, so I take your point that continuation, we are all coming to an institution and we are required to run with that institution. But the political paradigm in our society is slightly different. In that it is impacted by who's sitting where at a particular time, although it shouldn't be like that in the long run.
I also I'll come to the floor now. I also like the argument that the fact that as much as we have the policies, I think one of the key aspects is that the awareness of those policies.
Yeah.
Are those policies taken down to the people and broken down to them in a language and a manner that they are actually be able to actually understand. Let me take, so one hand there. Okay, let me start with here.
Statement. My name is Marsha Reed. I'm the CEO of Lithon Foundation. The change starts with me. We should stop giving our fingers to Parliament, the government, and our organizations. It starts with me. I need to educate my daughter. And what we are doing at Lithon is having monthly talks about the imposter syndrome, about how to communicate at the work as female, not losing our identity, but using it and taking the opportunities. So we must just take responsibility ourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Imposter syndrome amongst women, it's real.
So my thinking is that if we say that the onus is on the institutions, right? And we leave it at that. If there are fiscal policies and you don't comply with those fiscal policies, there are repercussions. You are held to account. Or if there's a health and safety thing and you're not compliant, you are held to account. So if you have a team that is predominantly women, but the women in your team are not growing, and year after year, it just so happens that it's the same people who make it board level, etc., senior management. Who holds an institution to account when that happens? Because otherwise we're going to say what we're saying now, 10 years from time. Yes, we have amazing policies, the institutions implementation.
Thank you very much. Let me go over there. I saw one hand up there.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Desiree. I do public relations. I talk. But I'll try to be really short. Maybe just a few comments and also just a few things in terms of, but maybe I will start off with just adding on to the comment that was left now that it starts with us. A lot of the times when women speak up for women, they're considered as feminist. I don't quite get the word all the time. But then you are also, they even have levels of feminism. They're like, you're radical, you what?
Yeah.
What is this? But I do concur with the idea of it starts with you. And that how many of us are actually speaking up at offices in terms of there's issues like sanitary pads, for instance. You'd get offices installed with condoms and then those type of things, but rarely do and then insist on certain things that why are we not having sanitary pads or stuff like that in there, which is something that women is all the time going to use. Sometimes it's also very difficult as a woman to have to explain to a male boss, I got my periods. I just have a pain in my ovaries. Like, even when I'm saying I'm not well, I'm going to the doctor. There's a lot of times when you are unable to express all of these personal things. But how many times do we take it upon ourselves to sensitize the man? The other was also like in sharing opportunities. And Kellen, I'd like to thank you very much for sharing opportunities, because I always say information is power. And what happens most of the time is that information does not reach the people. Therefore, education lacks on levels that are, to the ordinary woman that is on the street. It's not that she also does not have maybe ways of inputting, but because they're unaware of a lot of the information that they need. So by sharing that, I also think that it is something that we can take on ourselves by just sharing information, like networking. I can't help you, but I know who can. That is also one of it. The other thing I wanted to mention was not recently, but maybe like 2 years ago, I needed to send off my daughter to university. And this is just something that keeps occurring in my head. Because before she left, I needed to sit down with her and give her hacks on how to be safe. And I was wondering whether women, in fact, that are birthing these boys, is that a conversation that normally goes when you send your child to university? Like, I need to tell her, don't ask something here, go by the security guard. In fact, it's better to ask for help at a service station because they have cameras. Like, how are we so aware of all of these hacks, how to be safe? And I'm just wondering if these are conversations that goes to a boy child, because I don't have a boy child. So I don't know, when the people that do raise these boys, is it something, what are the conversations that as a young mother sending off a boy to university, because I need to tell my child, don't be with a boy in a room alone. But it's just a thought that comes up. I don't know if there's anyone here that could maybe share, or maybe we can network about it in other institutions as well. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you very much.
Otherwise, I'll
you very
just
much.
get on. Thank you so much.
As we are coming towards the conclusion also, I think we need to start wrapping up. Let me actually allow the panelists to come in, because we are actually running out of time. Okay. But also something before that I also want to put in there that was actually raised by Kaylin, and also that you also touch on a little bit, is also the support system. What support system do we have in place actually to prepare our young ones for the world there and the consequences they are likely to face?
I think this is more for Ms. Boyson on the safety. That we said that there are institutions, but that we work so much in isolation. Yeah. And I was wondering, in the case of Kaylin's study of herself, having to report certain types of abuse, and I think rape is quite rape, or like any of, for instance, is a very sensitive case to bring. And most of the time, the victims, in fact, even of domestic violence, need to be sent to hospital first before they come to the police. What are the, I mean, is it possible, for instance, for such officers to be situated at hospitals? Because if I need to go to the hospital, then the doctor is there. The hospitals are equipped with social workers, and to assign a police officer or someone there so that all of these things are happening, whereas I have a space where I could be kept for a day or two on a bed, that's if there is a bed in the hospitals, to be kept there, because sometimes we need to go back to our abuses after having to go through this cumbersome, embarrassing, degrading process of just having to report something that you are a victim of.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will allow the panelists now to come in
also
as part of...
Quick ones. The first one is the police actually have training materials that on sexual violence, domestic violence, and human rights. And it's supposed to be built in as part of their annual planning and training and refresher courses. But obviously it requires also that it starts with you internalizing and believing that you have a role to play and an important role to play. Who is accountable? You know, I think all of us are accountable. With the Shut It All Down movement, that was accountability being sought by us. You know, the minister's cabinet is accountable to, from time to time, check in to see How are we doing on gender equality? How are we doing on women's empowerment, whether it's economic or social? So government, particularly the executive, has a responsibility. Because of Article 45 of the Namibian Constitution, the National Assembly members, legislatures are accountable because that's their platform to interrogate, the executive and ask, how far are we, can we, improve on the safeguards? And then you have accountability institutions like the Equity Commission, even the ministry with whatever directorates it has. So accountability really cuts across all of us. It does require, from time to time, check-in from civil society, from members of the public, to say we need to see more improvement on these particular areas. Because that's the other way that we can account to the Namibian public about the progress that we're making, and also to acknowledge the lapses and the challenges that and the limitations that we have on some of these things. I think the question around speaking up also relates to that accountability. Just in conclusion, because I also need to leave, is, I have a boy child and he's 17, and the only conversation I had with him is to tell him not to be in a room alone with a girl. And I told him, if you put it in, there's likely to be someone coming out of there. So be careful. But I think you make an excellent point about the types of conversations that we should be having with. We are only telling our girl children not to walk around with short dresses, but we are not telling the men that it's you even if you see a short dress, it doesn't entitle you to behave in a certain fashion.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Also, as a way of maybe Kenan, you can come in there, and Natasha, also as a way of rounding up as well.
No, I wanted to agree. I think I mentioned earlier, I turned 31 last month, and my mother was very open growing up. So I knew all of those things. Don't do this, before I even knew what they meant. I didn't understand what they really mean, but I knew them because she told me, do not do this. If someone touches this, like all of those things. And I never actually thought about the conversations that we have with boys. I also, just before I conclude, I want to thank everyone. There were some really, really great contributions made in the discussions that also allowed us to, provoke our thoughts, and we'll be able to apply our minds to some of it at some point. It's always nice to have a discussion where we can also, especially from the young women, very, very valuable questions that you've posed and statements you've made. I think just in conclusion, we can all recognize, that the importance of educating our girls and in terms of skills development is a major priority across the board. It's one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well. But we can only hope to move forward and to achieve greater things in terms of women in the workforce. If we start recognizing our shortcomings and then identifying them, recognizing them, taking ownership of them, and then collectively working together. And then obviously not to work in isolation. Time and time again, we're speaking about creating opportunities, allowing for was mentorships or this, or sharing of information. Sometimes we get a job position or a scholarship, and I know for I can't go, but now I don't want to share it to the next girl child next to me, or to the women. Why not? You don't need to be against something to be for something. All right. So there's nothing with equipping the women around us with the necessary tools and stuff, because we learn from each other. And in the end, and this is going to sound so but in the end, we're all working towards one common goal, and we should not be tearing each other down when it comes to progressing to education, to encouragement. In actual fact, we speak about how women are nurturing creatures, and that should go beyond just the mother-daughter, mother-son relationship, but you go to the professional career women, to the professional career women, or the up-and-coming, inexperienced professional. Thank you very much.
Any final words from your side, Natasha?
Yes, I also just want to take this opportunity to thank the audience and for the organization to invite us to this very important discussion. Just maybe related to your question, it comes back to policy. There are certain clear procedures, policies in place in terms of dealing with abuse or victims of abuse. And I think that, and I know there's also regular training for police officers to do what to do in case, when a case is reported, for example. I think the question is really that some people are just not implementing these policies and directives, because I also for sure know that at the Katutura Hospital there's an office. They have a new name. I know it was previously Women and Child. Yes. And that unit is specifically assigned for those cases, and that is why they are even at the hospital, so that victims don't have really to go to police. They actually need to go there, but I don't know whether they're 24/7. There are certain, but I know there's procedures in place. But all the police stations are well informed about those procedures. So if a case is reported, they are actually supposed to inform maybe the person on standby and act upon it. So I bring me back to say that, you know, people should be kept accountable if they are not implementing those policies, for example. And then I think it just really come back to continuous sensitization, information sharing sessions, awareness raising campaigns, because I think we can never stop. And we shouldn't give up, because just maybe talking to Caitlin on one occasion is already awareness raising, information sharing, and even the same with talking to your child. I believe, I think we have discussions with our kids where they said, Mommy, I actually told Kaylin that Mommy said this. So, you know, so we shouldn't wait for big audiences or big platforms. Let it start with us. I think today's message should be, let it start with us. That doesn't matter how small, but let us just turn that fire on.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I think at this juncture I would like to invite the director to close off, and then to close off the evening. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Honorable Minister Dausep, Natasha and Kaylin, and all participants, I really thank you very much and appreciate very much this evening. It's been really a fruitful debate, and it's not the end today of our discussion. We will continue keeping an eye on that, and we can also continue discussing it this evening. The doors are still open, and we prepare some food, some drinks, so feel free and comfortable to continue the discussion there. And well, I can just sum up by saying the policies are there, the legal framework is there, the Constitution is providing us with equality, but it's us who must take it up to be really the woman, the agent of change, and to live these policies. Now, the government cannot implement everything, can't have the eyes on every corner of the families, of the schools, of the working place. It is ourselves, and to be courageous, it's also something I must commit myself. As a woman, we always step a little bit back and say, oh, I'm not so sure if I can. Yes, you can, just try it. Yeah? The men are even not better, yes? And sometimes also to copy a few behaviors of them also. It's my own. Yeah, and thank you so much for also sharing very individual, some private biographies. It's always fruitful to know that. And yeah, with KAS, I must say thank you. Stay tuned with Konrad Adenauer Foundation. With my team, we will find out more topics that are interesting and that are of interest for the public, for all of us. And with that, stay tuned, and you are kindly invited, and please proceed to the buffet. Thank you so much. And the mayor will take care for tidying up then. Eh? Thank you so much.